So I am Laura. I am one of the San Diego chapter leaders and one of the TNN virtual event hosts. I have been to many of these events. I try not to miss too many of them and love hearing from all the speakers. I'm really excited for our event today. And then before we get started, I am going to quickly share my screen and chat with you about some things regarding the Nomadic Network. So for those of you that are new, the Nomadic Network is a global community of like-minded travel enthusiasts who have come together to learn and inspire each other to travel better, cheaper, and longer. So we launched at the end of 2019 with the hopes of having 22 in-person meetups around the world. We had actually a couple of those. And then as we know, the pandemic hit, and we have pivoted now and moved all of our events to virtual events, such as the one today, which is wonderful because now not only are we able to connect with everyone in our own regions, but we can connect with everyone worldwide. And we have, if you're not familiar with the way the Nomadic Network events work, we have 3 different types. So we have the one today, which are travel presentation style events. Then we have regional happy hours that happen all over the world on a monthly basis. And then we have monthly book clubs. So little something for everyone. And I'll share a little bit more about that at the end of our call as well. And then a couple things to keep in mind for today. If you are comfortable, I see a lot of you that have your cameras on, so thank you. We love to see your smiling faces. I will keep you all muted for the duration of the call so we can make sure we hear our presenter. And then, as I mentioned, use that chat box. This is a great way to connect with everyone, share your relevant tips and experiences. And then this will also be where you're going to ask your questions. So when you think of your question, just jot it down. If you can just write the word question first so I can keep track of it, and I'll make sure we get all of your questions answered at the end of the presentation. We are here to learn, satiate your wanderlust, and most importantly, have fun. And know that our speakers, like Steve today, are doing this out of the kindness of their heart. So we are so appreciative to him to giving us his time and insight and wisdom today. And then I'm quickly going to touch on Patreon. So Patreon is this exclusive subscription membership program that we've had for the past year. And actually, Nomadic Matt is now revamping and launching a new program that he will be giving more info out about in the next couple days. We'll still have the same perks as I've listed here before, but I'm sure there will be new enhancements to it as well. So stay tuned for that. If you're already a member, you can just move on over. And if you aren't, then keep a lookout for new info that's coming up on that. It'll be fun. All right, so with that said, I'm so excited now to introduce our speaker for today. So Steve is here to talk to us all about hidden travel. So he is here, he helps new and experienced travelers to kind of think differently and think about, maybe not taking that same trip that you've always taken and try to do it in a different way. He encourages travelers to think about how you can travel differently with a different passion and your purpose in life. And I know he's going to talk a little bit today about the book that he is launching in just a couple days called Hidden Travel. I'm so excited for him to hear about this. He has traveled to over 50 countries, and I know when the world opens up again, you can find him maybe every other week or so on a plane, and he has his branding agency in Seattle where he is flying to and from a lot. So without further ado, I'm so excited to welcome Steve. Steve, I'll let you take it over from here.
All right. Thank you, Laura. And good to see you all here tonight. We're going to go through a presentation first. I'm going to go through it pretty quickly, just to cover a lot of different things here. And then we'll have time for the questions afterwards. So let me get us going here and share this screen. Here we go. All right, so we are going to be talking tonight about this idea called hidden travel, which is more than an idea. Well, we'll talk about what it is in a minute here. You can find more here at exploreyourworlds.com. That's worlds with a plural, since almost everyone I tell that to is, oh, explore your world. It's like, no, it's about more than one world. It's like the world in you and the world around you. For more information on a lot of things we're going to be talking about tonight here. Okay, so let's jump in here. What we're going to cover here, we're looking at this idea of what is hidden travel. And then we're going to explore the idea of this concept of more. I'll get into that, but the original subtitle of the book was The Way to More. So it's not about more things. It's about actually more of what matters most to you. And then how to connect your worlds. There's that plural again of worlds. And then we're going to look at the best part of your trip, what research shows to be the most important, or at least the happiest part of any trip. We're going to look at what not to pack. Now, obviously, there's plenty of things that not to pack, like, I don't know, a washing machine or, Encyclopedia Britannica, full volume set, those type of things. But there's a lot of things that you may not think about as being things you should not pack. Similarly, what not to do on a volunteer vacation. If you're going to go and serve someplace, what are some of the things you want to do and what are some of the things you don't want to do in order to make it a great experience for you and for the people you're visiting there? We're going to look at some lessons we can learn from the blind traveler. The blind traveler was a British naval officer back in around the early part of the 19th century, a man named Lieutenant James Holman. And he, as of probably up until recently, with all the people like counting countries now, up until recently, he was the most traveled person in world history, even though he was blind. So we're going to look at what we can learn from his experience. Then we're going to explore how to create these magic moments. So the whole premise of this book, Hidden Travel, is about how to create more of these magic moments that those are the ones that you have them on a trip. I'm sure every one of you who's traveled have experienced this idea of something that just touches you and moves you so much that leaves a memory that will last a lifetime. How do you actually find or experience more of those, and how might you even create those for others? Then we're going to look at best ways to end a trip. There's actually a single best way that most people don't think about. So we're going to explore that, and then we'll go into questions and answers. So what is Hidden Travel? Well, it's clearly a book, but it's actually a series. There's going to be a number of ones coming out over the next several months, Hidden Travel for artists and creatives. So if you're an artist or a creative type, there'll be a version there specifically on how to connect creativity to travel. There's one for students. There's one for business travelers. There's one for other people that are going to want to use it almost as a team building type of tool. There's all sorts of different things that are going to be coming out of that. There's one for faith-based travelers as well. So it's a series, and then also it's this mindset. It's a different way to think about travel and actually to think about life. And we'll explore what that means a little bit more now. So we talked about this idea of more. So hidden travel is about more in the sense of it's more than hidden places. So I just did a article, and actually some of you may have participated in that. I reached out to a number of travel writers and bloggers for their recommendations on the best hidden places. So on exploreyourworlds.com, there is if you type in exploreyourworlds.com/hidden places, you'll find a great, very long post on how to find hidden places. So it's got from books, from bloggers' recommendations, other sites, things like that. So if the hidden place aspect appeals to you, that's there. But it's also about things like hidden emotions, relationships, and dreams. These ideas of what you really don't expect on a trip, but end up being the most important parts of it. So for example, one of the key quotes in the book is from Martin Buber, the philosopher, who said, all journeys have their secret destinations of which the traveler is unaware, right? So it's this idea that we all encounter things on a trip that are hidden to us before we go, but that end up being some of the most important part. So this idea of more includes what you want most in life. So more meaning, purpose, joy, creativity, adventure, fulfillment, happiness, whatever it is that matters most to you. How do you use travel as a means to achieve that? That's really what the book is all about. So more is one of these concepts that it starts within, right? So it connects your interior life, but as different, just like we're all different. It's different from each person. It's a lot about less, meaning we'll talk about this idea of freedom and limitations, that sometimes the best travel experiences are the ones where you have a lot of constraints. How many of you guys have had the experience of like having a part of your trip canceled, or a plane, a flight being canceled, or something that completely throws off what you had hoped your trip to be, but it ends up being even better because you had these constraints that were placed upon you. So that's another aspect of it here. And it represents these idea of hidden purposes. We're going to talk a lot about that in a few minutes here about what are the hidden purposes that you can have on a trip that are going to make your trip even more powerful. All right. So this idea of more occurs most when you do connect the world around you with the world within you. And so when you're operating on both those interior and exterior levels, you're going to have a better travel experience and quite frankly, a better life. All right. So let's look at connecting worlds. What does that mean? All right. What do you most love to do? That seems like an easy question, doesn't it? Because we all go, oh yeah, I love to do this, this, and this. Well, the reality is research shows that most of us don't really know what we love. Okay. As Americans, in fact, it was her book, Eat, Pray, Love, right? Elizabeth Gilbert, probably all familiar with that. One of my favorite parts of that book was a line where she pulled this, it was a researcher in Italy who said this. He said that um, Americans or Italians are really into their passion, but Americans are into distraction, okay? And so Italians, they'll have a complete, conniption fit. I have no idea what a conniption fit is, but it's one of those expressions, right? Um, if the pasta is cooked to, beyond al dente or something, but they don't care if the government is running or not like that. They care about their passions. In America, we care about our distractions more than anything else. So most of us don't actually know what we truly love. So in the book, there's a whole section on how to figure that out, and then how to use travel to help you understand that even better. Then once you do know what it is you most love to do, then how do you do that on the trip? So there's a section, a story about a woman that I heard about who she simply pursues amusement parks because her passion are roller coasters. And it seems like, well, that's kind of an eclectic decision. But the thing is about that, when you're pursuing the things you love, it's not just the activity. She has now met with all these people around the world who are absolutely a fascinating tribe of people interested in the same thing. So she's found her people just because of that passion. So here's a question for you guys. Think about it this way. What does one great day look like for you? Okay. If you could choose anything you wanted in the entire world, but obviously you can't travel in time necessarily, but if you could, in wherever you are, choose to do whatever it is that you love the most, what would that look like for one day? All right. So that's something you can think about at home. What would you do? What would you have for breakfast? What would you do after that? Who would you be with? Would you do something that's like a lot of excitement or really mellow? What would that look like? Now take that one great day concept and apply it to a trip. Most of us make our trips based upon the destination, and then we fit things in around that. But what if you did it backwards? What if you actually figured out what is it that you most love to do, and then you actually built your trip around that? Okay. It's a completely different way from how most of us tend to plan a trip. But if you try this, even for one day, you'll be amazed. And then you can do it to 2 days and 3 days. And it's a little bit harder, but it's a lot more rewarding to try it that way. So how could you plan a trip around those interests? For example, again, if you like gardening, you can visit nurseries, you can visit, gardens. If you like cars, you can visit mechanics. It's amazing what happens. What's the old line is, a passion shared is a passion doubled. So the more that you find people who like it, the better your trips, okay? And then it's this idea throughout the book of how do you make travel as a means rather than an end? Most of us treat it as an end. It's like, well, it's a trip. It's wonderful. I'm meeting new people, going new places. In and of itself, it's wonderful. And it is. But it can be even richer when you have a purpose for that trip and you use your trip as a means to achieve that purpose. Okay. Different way to think about it. So this quote is actually, it's troubling to some people, but it's actually very true, is if you go on a trip hoping to find meaning and you don't bring a sense of what meaning is to you, you're going to be like pretty scattered and all over the map. But if you know what matters to you, you bring that meaning to your trip, and then everything becomes more powerful because you're able to bring that and see that in everything that you do. All right. So what's the best part of your trip? Anyone want to guess what the best part of any trip is? Since I'm not looking at the chat, I can't see it here with the share screen on. So I'm going to hope you guess what it is. You guys can do that. Actually, maybe I can bring it up here. Let's see here. Will you show me? No, it won't do it. All right. Okay. So I can't tell, but if any of you said the first part, actually, it's not even the first part. It's before the first part. Research shows that the happiest part of a trip is the anticipation of the trip. In fact, some researchers have suggested that if you want to really optimize happiness, don't take one big trip a year, take multiple small ones, because you'll actually have more opportunities for anticipation. Interesting thought. All right, another thing, this was done a test on dopamine with rats, lab rats, okay? And what they did was they tested these lab rats to show them like, they got when they pushed a button, they would get a release of some food, right? And they would show that when they were happiest. Turns out the rats were happier, not when they got the food, but when they were anticipating getting the food. And here's the thing that's even more interesting about it. When they released the food, not every time they pushed it, but only half the time. So half the time they pushed, they got food, half the time they didn't. Turns out that increased the dopamine release, the happiness chemical in your brain. It released that even more. Okay. What that means is that if you don't know what all the outcomes are, it actually increases your happiness. So here's a key for all of us. Don't overplan. You want to research enough and understand enough, but if you overplan, you're going to kind of suppress that unknowing, and that's going to suppress your anticipation and your happiness. So in other ways to kind of boost the happiness factor there in the same way with anticipation is to practice surprise trips. Either surprise a partner or have them surprise you, or there's companies now that will do it for you, that you can actually say, hey, we want to do this date, and they'll completely arrange it all for you. And you have no idea until like an hour before you're supposed to leave for the airport where you're supposed to go. That dramatically increases the anticipation because it's all mystery to you. Having a quest, having a theme to a trip, those also add both purpose and anticipation. So the thing about preparing is you're not preparing so your itinerary so that everything goes perfectly. You're preparing yourself, okay? It's a mental game, it's a mindset thing. So that you are prepared for when things don't go as planned. And any of us who've traveled know that not everything goes as planned, okay? All right, what to pack, what not to pack. I'll go through this quickly. Anything you have to check. All right, some of you are going to argue and say, but if I don't check and I have to struggle putting that big bag in the overhead. Well, if that bag is so big that it doesn't fit in the overhead, you've overpacked already. All right. So I do understand there are times when you don't want to have to deal with it. But here's the problem that I found is if you don't check your bag, in other words, if you have it with you, if your flight gets canceled, you have far greater freedom to catch other flights. Whereas they have a law since 9/11 where you have to follow your bag. So if your bag is already checked to your destination, you go to the gate and the plane is delayed or something, or it's canceled because of mechanical failure, you still have to wait around and follow where they tell you. You can't take the next flight out and everything. So there's more than just lugging around a big bag to packing light and not checking it. You don't need more than 1 week's worth of clothes. I know that's hard for those of you for whom fashion is a key thing. Some people I know will go a 3-week trip and have a different outfit for every day. I am not one of those people. I would much rather have a lighter bag than have to do laundry, more often, even washing in the sink if I have to, just to have that lightness. Don't bring or pack with you anything you can buy locally. All right. Shampoo, toothpaste. Most countries around the world have all these things. So only carry enough that you need, not like 3 weeks extra beyond your trip. Do pack multi-use items like a scarf. Scarf can be a scarf for your neck. It can be a head covering when you're for example, in Europe in churches or in Muslim countries where you have to have your head covered. It can serve as wrap it around your waist. It can be a belt. It can be a pillow covering. It can do all these different things. The more multi-purpose things that you have, the fewer things you have to bring with you. Don't pack also things you're not willing to lose. Don't bring expensive jewelry. Don't bring sentimental items. Don't bring things like that. Figure everything you're going to take with you, you might lose it. So think about that. Instead, bring both the necessities that are both tangibles and intangibles. So what do I mean by intangibles? These are going to be things like labels and stereotypes, okay? The more you bring these mental things with you, the more they slow you down on a trip. So instead of bringing labels and stereotypes, bring with you the sense of openness or curiosity or flexibility. And most of all, leave behind expectations. I think expectations destroy more trips than just about anything else, okay? So there's this difference between traveling with expectations and traveling expectantly, okay? The difference example in the book is this, is if I go to Paris or if I go to France, expecting to try cassoulet, right, a French dish that is as good as my Aunt Marie's, I will probably be disappointed. If I go instead to traveling expectantly to say, I'm going to try every type of cassoulet I can there, It's a very different outcome because with the first one, you're setting yourself up for a direct comparison that you're most likely going to fail at. If you're doing the second one, you're opening yourself up towards a lot of great possibilities. It's a big deal. It's amazing what our brains do for us when we travel. Okay, so another one is don't pack a crammed itinerary. Be willing to take your itinerary and let go of it. We talked about hidden places. Most of the hidden experiences that you will have on a trip are ones that you discover when you're at the destination. You meet a local who invites you to this little hidden restaurant or bar or something like that. Okay. You're not going to say, oh, I can't go because I've scheduled on my thing here that I have to go see this particular site on this day. So I'm sorry for your generous offer, but I'm not going to take it. No, let it go. Same thing with too many reservations. Don't make reservations, particularly for food, because learn how to ask the right questions. In the book, there's like 2 pages of nothing but just different questions. For example, here's a good example of a good and bad question. Bad question. Don't ask a local, hey, where would you recommend that I go for dinner? Because you know what they're going to tell you? They're going to say simply like McDonald's, because they're going to look at you and say, oh, you're an American. Therefore, you probably want to eat something that's American. So I'm going to recommend to you a place I think a tourist would like. Instead, ask them, where would you go on a really big date? Where would you go for your for your anniversary? Okay. Where do you go with your friends for dinner? Okay. Those are different questions and they will get you different responses. Or don't even ask a question. Go and notice, for example, at lunch. This is an easy technique if you're in a city, particularly a big city. Look for office buildings, look for construction sites, look for even government offices. And at lunchtime, watch the people coming out of these buildings and see where they go. Okay, because they are going to go to the local places that are actually probably much better than the tourist type of places that you would find. So follow the locals and you'll get a better thing than making reservations sometimes. Okay, so don't ask strangers. Become at least even for a short period of time, someone that they don't consider to be a stranger when you're asking. All right, so we talked about how to do or not do a volunteer vacation. Here's how not to do it. All right. So first of all, you need to know why you're going. All right, why you're going overseas all the way over there to volunteer. Is it for the sake of really helping out, or is it really to make you feel better about helping out? All right. So hard question there. So you have to ask yourself this: do you have a specialized skill? Are you a doctor or a nurse or a computer programmer? Someone that for whom there are not the equivalent people in the location you're going that could also be doing the same type of skills. Okay. If they're not, here's the hard news. You're doing something that a local could do just as easily as you could. Right. And so you have to ask yourself this: if you took the cost of your ticket to get there and contributed that towards a local organization that's working to do the same thing there, do you realize how many people they could likely hire to do the same thing that you're going over there to do? Okay, so you would be bringing resources into the local economy. You would be employing people. You would be helping out in a more sustainable way and not creating dependency upon foreigners and all this type of stuff. So if you're going over there just to do a skill, chances are you're much better off not actually doing it. All right. So that's why you should not do a volunteer vacation. However, okay, there's this other approach. And those of you who have done it well probably have experienced this. This phrase, learn, serve, share, comes from a group called World Servants, and they're an intercultural learning organization. And this is their model, because most people go over there and their first initial thing is, oh, I want to share what I know and what I do. And maybe I'll help others and serve them. And then maybe I might learn. They say, no, the better way is to flip it around. Many of you probably have heard the phrase, the concept. It's actually in a lot of schools, high schools, of service learning. Well, there's a group that is actually saying, internationally in particular, maybe a better approach isn't service learning, but learning service, right? Start with learning. Start with going as a learner. Go almost like you're this anthropologist doing research on the culture there, because you're going to go with a lot better attitude instead of this idea, oh, I'm coming here to do, be this great savior that can help them. Instead, you're going with this attitude of, I'm coming here to learn. All right, so here's why you should do a volunteer activities. It's not for your work, okay? It's for the relationship, right? I've heard this over and over from people overseas who say, we don't need you to do the work, but the fact that you would come thousands of miles just to be here means so much to us. If you go as an outsider, own that. Okay. Don't try to be an insider, because what your greatest value is an outsider who sees things in ways that people who live there can't. And you help them to see their own place with new eyes and to value it in ways that they have probably forgotten how to do. So it's all about the relationship. And that's what you're there for. And here, even if you're not volunteering on a vacation, it matters in this way. People care more about your humanity than they do your competency, right? How many of you have had like great encounters with locals, not because you were like this expert, but because you were in a point of need, right? You were lost, or car broke down or something, and you experienced the kindness of strangers. That happens far more, okay, when you are not operating out of your competency or your expertise. It happens when you are humble and we are in a point of need. People actually, again, research shows people like to help others out, and you create that opportunity for them when you do it. So if you make have a great experience in build relationships, do it from a humble standpoint rather than a point of just of pride and thinking that you kind of have all the answers. All right, lessons from the blind traveler. So I mentioned to you about Lieutenant James Holman. One of his greatest assets was he almost had this form, they refer to it as human echolocation. He could use all of his senses to determine where he was or to learn from things. So for example, in Russia, he could tell the approach of a person, whether they were a peasant or whether they were aristocrat, by the sound of wooden shoes versus like the leather shoes, you know, for the different classes. He could and know exactly what was happening just based upon all of his different senses. Too many of us go with that are sighted, go and rely on our sight alone as opposed to touching and listening and tasting and just being present, being mindful to your other senses in a place. Honestly, you will have an amazing experience when you just try to experience it through your other senses rather than just through your sight. The other thing that was amazing about him, most of us go to travel because what we want to say, oh, I've been there. I've had this firsthand experience. I want to see everything for myself. I don't want to rely on others. That's the exact opposite of what he did. Because he couldn't see, he had to rely on others to describe to him this beautiful scene before him that, you know, it was too far away for him to touch or anything. So he would listen to others. And he listened so well that he actually ended up getting a far richer experience from the place that many of us go and we try to learn on our own. Okay, so this ties to the idea of seeing through the eyes of others and being more empathetic. When you truly listen to others and seek to be put yourself in their position, you're going to see their place in a lot different ways than you do through your own eyes. So this idea of empathy and being empathetic and sharing that is really important for travel. Okay, last thing is here is that's me, believe it or not, taking a surfing lesson here in the state of Washington. So if any of you guys know our beaches and waters up here in the state of Washington, you'll know it's not exactly the easiest place to surf. So that's Sean in the water there who is coaching me and telling me about the magic hand. What I am displaying there is the magic hand, which, ooh, yes, with the zoom camera, there we go. Special effects, hold it up. Most people, when you surf, when you're learning how to surf, you're looking at, you're down at your board, you're looking over at the waves, you're looking at the beach in the distance, you're all over the map. The magic hand is almost like this surf mysticism that says, watch your hand, hold your hand out in front of you and watch your hand, because what it's going to do is focus you strictly on one thing. And here's the principle for you as travelers. When you focus on one thing, like the purpose for your trip, it's the same as the magic hand. What happens is the magic hand, you're actually taking in more around you, but in a peripheral view than you would be if your head was just, you know, all over the place, looking all over. And as a result, you actually end up seeing more by seeing less. Okay, it's kind of a paradox, but try it and you'll see that if you focus on the one thing that you're there for, your purpose, what it is you're seeking, you're going to actually take in all the other stuff more by that principle. Okay, so often you can see more by focusing on less. All right, magic moments. We mentioned those earlier. Great thing about traveling in moments is this idea that you may not have a lot of time in terms of hours, but you almost have endless or limitless moments on a trip. So shifting to this mindset, there's a whole chapter in the book on time travel, which is reorienting the way you think about time from a chronos. This is the Greek terms for time. Chronos, which is a quantitative way of looking at time, to a kairos, which is a qualitative way of looking at time. So if you say, what time are you going to the party? That's a chronos question. If you say, hey, did you have a good time at the party? That's a kairos question. Most of us travel based on chronos because we're used to it in our culture, thinking, by our watches and by the clock. The best travel experiences are going to be kairos type ones, where you're concentrating more on the moment, right, rather than on the whole like time thing. All right, so research says the most memorable parts of your trip are the peak experiences and the end experiences. So we'll talk about end in a moment. Let's look at the peak ones. How do you build peaks? Well, read the book Power of Moments by Chip and Dan Heath. That's a good starting point, because they outline these 4 things that make up what they call a defining moment. And a defining moment is one that is memorable and meaningful, that combination, okay, or a magic moment as we call it. The 4 things you can do to actually build a meaningful or a defining moment are this. A peak defining moment is going to be elevated, right? It's going to be different than normal routine life. Trips by them very nature, they're elevated experiences. So that one's easy to accomplish, okay, on a trip. They provide you a sense of pride or accomplishment. You run a 5K, you have that sense of accomplishment there, okay? If you do something you've never done, if you move beyond your comfort zone on a trip, you are experiencing a sense of accomplishment as well. They tend to provide a sense of insight, that aha moment that you learn something you've never known before. And you go, oh my goodness, I get this now. I see why this works the way it does. And finally, a sense of connection. So in the book, I talk about the difference of traveling solo versus with others. And it's interesting. If you travel solo, you actually increase your opportunity for meeting locals because they're more willing to reach out. So you have a form of connection there in solo travel. But if you travel with others, particularly like with your family, so Laura, this is one of the things, right, you think about all the time, is you can form these types of connection that are going to last for the rest of your life because you're bonding as a family, for example, there. So you can do it either way, traveling together or alone. But these 4 things, if you practice these on a trip and seek these out, you can actually create experiences that are elevated, sense of accomplishment, sense of insight and connection that are going to transform your trip. I guarantee you, it's probably one of the most helpful things I've ever done in terms of travel is applying these to a trip or to a moment on a trip. Okay. So, yeah, so it just helps you to expand your trip and experience your sense of more there. All right, last one here is make sure, okay, on time, we'll go quickly here. Best way to end a trip. Anyone want to guess what the best way to end a trip is? You'll never get this one, although the Pixar soul should give you a sense there is. You want to do this. You want to treat your last day of a trip or the end of the trip like a Pixar film. And what makes a Pixar film a Pixar film? It's not the animation. It's the fact that not almost, every single Pixar film ends with a poignant ending. They don't end with a happy ending. Think about it. Most of us try to end our trips on a happy note. And I think happy note is good, but if you want a really emotionally satisfying trip, end it with just a little bittersweetness, okay? Recognize that you're in a place you wish you could stay for the rest of your life, but you know you can't, and just appreciate that, okay? If you're with others, like we're talking about your family or something, take time to share what it is you most loved about this trip, or even better, what it is you most loved about the other person on this trip. What did you come to appreciate about them? What did you learn about them that you didn't know beforehand on this trip? Okay, think through how could you create a kind of an ending to your trip that's going to have that element of poignancy to it, because it will be a far more satisfying trip emotionally than anything you could do to make it happy. Just like a Pixar movie, they don't go for the happy ending; they go for the poignant one. The last thing you can do is practice this idea of reverse anticipation. Remember, we talked about how anticipation is such an important thing for happiness. Start it on your way home. Think about the things that you're going to do when you get home. How can you take your trip and start applying it to home? What are the things you've learned on your trip that you can be doing at home? Even things like photos, like a photo collection or a collage or something like that, projects that you can be doing. Think about those as you're traveling home or near the end of your trip, and it will make the entry back into, routine life so much better because you're already excited about that than you are if you people that hit the post-trip blues, they don't do this, right? And so it hits really hard. Actually, here's one last thing, a little tip on post-trip blues. The best way to overcome those, exercise. Because most of us don't realize how much we're moving on our trips. And we come home, like, especially if you're working in an office and you're doing that and you realize, oh man, I feel miserable because I'm not in my happy place of a trip. Well, it's no, you're not exercising the way you worked before. And so jet lag and everything hits you. Okay. So reflect also on your trip. Most people have the experience of the trip and they think that, oh, I've learned from this trip. Well, learning doesn't occur from an experience. Learning only occurs when you reflect on the experience. Okay. So don't overlook the reflection part of it. You're going to get a lot more from a trip when you reflect on it and apply it to your life. Okay. So, and that's it. So the most hidden aspect of a trip may in fact be the meaning of it. What does that trip really mean? You'll only know after the trip because you're too close to it during the trip to understand that. All right, those are just some of the things from hidden travel. So here's the deal for you. If you're interested in the book at all, now is the time to get it, or actually wait till Thursday when it goes on sale. It goes live. The launch is actually Thursday of this week, and get it because it's at $1.99, regular $9.99. Okay, so that's if you're interested in this, now's the time to do it because after April 6th, it'll go back to the higher prices. If you don't want the book, but you want other resources, go to Explore Your Worlds. There's the traveler type quiz. I know a lot of you have done that. Figure out what type of traveler you are. It really helps you understand, remember, talk about what makes you happy. Same thing is understand what type of traveler you are, and you will have a better trip because you know how to plan and build a trip around the things that interest you. That's basically it. So let's go to questions and go from there.
Amazing. Oh my gosh, Steve, this was so inspiring. And I have to say, you have some beautiful quotes. I was trying to write them all down, but I'll just have to watch the replay of this to get all those
There you
quotes.
go. There you go.
Amazing. Oh my goodness. Definitely inspiring, definitely a great way for us to approach travel. So you've made me pause and think about how I want to travel differently. So thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got quite a few questions. So let's see, the first one I'm going to ask, this is kind of when we were talking about the carry-on check bags. And so Cheryl was curious about, so if you bring a carry-on bag, what if you want to bring wine back, or what if you want to bring wine to a host? How would you recommend doing that?
Well, you can bring wine back in your stomach. That's one way. But the more practical way is you're going to have to check your bag. Yeah, there's no other way around that when you have large liquids like that. So here's the trick that we do is if we are going to check, so it may not be wine, but it may be like ceramics or something like that we've picked up on a trip, is we bring an extra filled up bag with us. And then what we do is we take everything, all of our clothes, all of our dirty clothes, usually at the end of the trip, out of our carry-on bag, and we put them into this fold up bag. We check the fold up bag, which is completely nothing breakable in that thing. And we put like the breakables into our carry-on. Now the wine won't work in that case because of the liquid, but it will work for other breakable type of things to do it that way. Did I answer that enough?
Yes, that was perfect. Smart
Okay.
thinking. I like that. And Leah, I think she had also written in here that she tends to pack a duffel bag sometimes and bring that as well. So it's a good way to do it if you need to bring that wine back. So very smart. All right. So Sydney has a question on what are your thoughts on learning the local language when you go to a certain destination?
All right. So my favorite joke, right? You guys may have heard this one before, right? What do you call a person who speaks two languages? Bilingual. What do you call a person who speaks three languages? Trilingual. What do you call a person who speaks one language? American. So I tend to be of the belief that even 10 words of the local language are going to dramatically increase your connections with people anywhere you go. 10 words, anyone. I have learned a lot of languages, but I am not a natural language learner. Okay. But I will learn those 10 words because, please, hello, thank you, goodbye, yes, no, if you cheat me, I will not pay you. Actually, a friend of mine did learn that in Thai, just for the taxis over there. But learning just those few words alone are so helpful because it shows you're taking an interest in their culture enough to show that you're not expecting them to speak to you always in English. Okay, so yes, learning, and then if you want to go further, being on site is by far an immersion process is by far the best way to learn a language. But you can learn a lot, honestly, online now. There's so many great apps. You know, CDs, or if you still have a CD player in your car, but just even on, that you can get even on Spotify and different things like that. There's a lot of great ways to learn languages these days.
I agree. I was going to say it's so true. They make it easy for us for sure to learn. So just picking up those basic things just makes a difference, I think, when you're traveling and meeting those locals too. So I love that. All right, Sydney had another great question, which is, what is the most meaningful travel experience you have ever had?
Oh, that is a great question. I would say that one of them is, remember I said like the thing about the power of moments, applying it to a trip was one of the most, okay, so I'll share that because it's actually, that's the full stories in the book, but essentially my wife, my son, his wife, the four of us went to Slovenia and to the Dolomites in northern Italy a couple years ago. And I broached it with them at the time. Part of it was research for the book. It's like, oh yeah, let's see if this actually works, right? And I said, like, everyone has to choose one thing that they want the other three people to learn on this trip. So you have to create this kind of learning experience. I expected a complete rebellion, and they were all like, yeah, that sounds fun. So long story short is we ended up doing it. The thing my son wanted to do while we were in the Dolomites near Switzerland was a yodeling school, but the logistics didn't work out. Instead, he picked up local cheeses along the way. And then we did a blind tasting test when we were in Ljubljana in Slovenia. Daughter-in-law picked up dried flowers and taught us a flower arrangement and made like these little wreaths that we left in the apartment where we were staying for them. And my wife, when we were in this rural town in Slovenia, she hunted down a person who makes felt from the local sheep there and teaches how to do that. And she spoke English, so we were able to do a felt class. And mine kind of fell apart because my son got sick the day we were supposed to go to this hidden library and then buy a book there and all this stuff. And that part didn't work. But overall, it was incredibly meaningful because we put the effort into it. I think that's the key there.
Okay, that is amazing. We went to Slovenia, but we didn't do any of that. So I need to make sure we do that next time we travel. It's amazing. Wow. All right. And so kind of to piggyback on that, have you ever been to a place that you would like to go back to again?
Also a great question. I used to believe, no, I never want to go back to the same place. I have completely changed my mind in the writing of this book and the research, talking to other people, because it's the difference of traveling I tend to be as a photographer, a very visual person who likes architecture and things like that. And I have learned from others that if you travel for the people in a place, like it was actually my father-in-law and my mother-in-law who they go back to London all the time, or they used to when they could travel. And they would go to like Hyde Park. And my father-in-law told me, he said, like, Hyde Park is different every single day because the people in Hyde Park are different every single day. So if you pay attention to the people, like at the speaker's corner there, and listen to them, every day is a new world. Okay. And so it's completely turned my kind of thinking about, oh, I don't want to go back there. I've been there, done that. And now it's like, oh yeah, what else that chapter I mentioned on time travel, that's one of the key pieces there is learning to linger in a place, because it is exponentially different what you will discover in a place the longer you were there. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to get, if I stay 2 hours instead of 1 hour, I'm going to get twice as much of what I just experienced. It's like, no, you'll get about 3 or 4 times, because the light changes, the temperature changes, everything changes about that place, and new people come and go. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. We've got another great question from Todd. All right. So what are some good ways, he's asking, that you find the places you don't know that you want to see? So for example, a lot of it could be by interacting with the locals when you're there, but before you get on that plane, how would you go about doing that?
Okay, so it's funny because I have a chapter in the book on making plans, and it's mostly about this. There's very little about the packing. I put that on the blog post, right? But it's about how to find the places that matter to you. Number one way is do your research. There's primary research and secondary research. Primary research is asking people. Secondary research is looking at the things that are already out there. Let's start with the secondary. Secondary research is going to be what are the sources you have available to you. What I find are the unexpected sources that I have discovered, things like photo coffee table books, right? That I can see places, because like I said, I'm drawn to a place visually. I do YouTube videos of places there and go through them. And you can play them, here's a wonderful thing about YouTube is you can hit that little speed control and get through things just because you're not going for the experience of watching a documentary. You're going to see, is there something here that appeals to me? So you can go through a lot of content pretty quickly that way. Another way that I have found is reading the literature of a particular place. Okay, so just Google, here's the easiest way to do it. Google like novels set in Albania, if you're going to Albania, right? And you will see a list of those, read those, because what they do is, because they're set in those locations, they'll reveal locations that guide books and others won't have. And you may discover this amazing little cafe or restaurant or secret little place or a little town that is completely off the tourist map that you'll discover through that type of thing. Okay, that's kind of the primary. One more primary thing that you can do once you're there, and you can even do it here with Google Translate, is local newspapers. Okay, you can actually Google, like go to, like if I'm going to Germany, I would go to google.de, right, for Deutschland, and I would then type in the name of the place, and I would even say like a local newspaper, and look at the things that the listings that they have for local events. Okay, they will reveal all sorts of stuff in Google Translate. Just use Google Translate, or it's right there on Google itself. They'll translate this to English. You will uncover all sorts of wonderful things that are set up for the locals, not for yourself. That's primary. Or secondary. Primary, ask everyone you know who's been to that place. Who do you know who's been there? Who do you know who may live there? So it's a friend of a friend of a friend, oftentimes is the contact that you have there. And use that, because usually most people overseas, if you come from, say, from America, this is a good thing or a bad thing about being American, but they're pretty welcoming to you for that. Here's the thing. You got to practice this part, because I've seen people do this, and it's, quite frankly, it's rather exploitive. You don't want to use these contacts and literally use them and say, oh, thanks for showing me around and everything. This is great for my trip. It's like, no, if you're going to figure out what's the easiest place for them to meet, invite them to lunch or breakfast or dinner, pay for it. Okay. Do everything possible to make it a great experience for them. And like I mentioned, that thing about finding hidden places, they will reveal things to you that they never would have, just because you're the friend of a friend. All right. So there's a whole chapter in the book called Be Your Best Self. And it's this idea that when you are your best in a place, you will get the best from a place. All right. People will not share their hidden, favorite haunts with you unless you are a person that they consider to be someone that could be a friend. All right. So the more gracious you are, the more kind, the more encouraging you are, you will have a better experience. So just that reciprocity there.
That's wonderful. It's so true. And Laura B had a question about what your favorite resources are to plan a trip and build the anticipation. I feel like you kind of touched on that a little bit already, but Laura, if you have any more to ask on that, just drop it in the chat box. Unless, Steve, there was anything else you needed to mention, but I think you covered that with some of your tips already.
Yeah, I would say the thing about watch the videos, read the books, listen to the music, try to find local restaurants. Like if you're going to Ethiopia, find a local Ethiopian restaurant, because there's more out there than you think. The more you can do to put yourself in that anticipation mode and truly savor the anticipation, not as just like, oh, I can't wait to get to my trip, but almost think it's like, oh my gosh, I still have 3 months until my trip and I can enjoy it for that. That will actually help your anticipation quite a bit.
It's so true. I love the anticipation. So this is getting me excited, because now I want to go plan a trip and do all of this stuff beforehand. So wonderful, wonderful tips. All right. So Chris has a question. What do you think about over tourism?
I think it's horrible. Actually, and here's the reason why. I don't think there's a need for it. There was a whole thing before before COVID, and so one of the biggest growing trends in travel in 2019 was this thing called the second city trend. Second city set is, if you're going to East Coast of the United States, go to Philadelphia, don't go to New York. Okay, if you're going to England, don't go to London, go to York or go to Bath or someplace like that. You can experience most of the things that make a country special in the second or third or fourth or fifth most important cities there, because again, it all comes down to what you're looking for. If you're going strictly for the sights, if you are truly a sight seeker, or a sightseer and seeker, then yes, there are some of those. But I tell you this, if after a while, they all start looking pretty much the same. But the people, the small experiences, the little moments that you can have anywhere, they're going to be far more special. And you don't need the big city for those. In fact, you will usually find people are far more gracious. I mean, the reputation for the French in terms of being rude, it's like they're rude because if you're especially an American in Paris and you're being kind of that way to them, get outside of Paris and I have never had an experience where I could even imagine considering a person being rude outside of Paris. All right. So we kind of, over tourism is a self-perpetuating type of a thing. So I'm hoping that COVID has changed. In fact, Florence and Venice just announced that they're limiting like Airbnbs just to try to address over tourism coming out of COVID now.
It's a great point, and I bet a lot of other cities, countries start following suit with that too. So it will be interesting to see what happens moving forward. But at least some of them are starting to think about that, so that's good.
Yeah.
All right, so kind of switching to your career. So Christy had a question. Did you have a career that enabled your travel, or how did you go about funding this since you've been such a frequent traveler?
Ah, yes, my career. As I'm looking to a person whose name I will not mention on here, who knows about my career because I have worked with him. Yes, my career does enable me to travel, and the travel for work, which is mostly domestic, and it's the miles that come from building up all those domestic points, right, on mileage points that now enable me to travel international. So it has gone hand in hand. Although my background is, so I have an MBA in international management with a specialization in Mandarin Chinese and Pacific Rim studies and all that. So I have a pretty international kind of background anyway, and was doing traveling ever since I was a kid. So it's always been there, right? Like most of us, right? You have that travel bug, but it has been work that has in running a branding agency, a marketing agency. So I get to work with just amazing clients around the world, but mostly here in the United States, or they operate around the world. So it's been great.
And then I have a question just around that. Since the pandemic, have you had to stop all of your travels, or have any of that picked up? I'm just curious.
Okay, here's the answer you don't want to hear for the Nomadic network, but I will say it anyway, is I have had 3 trips, 4 maybe, since March in the last 12 months, okay? All domestic. And I thought it was going to be horrible at first, and it's like, this has been one of the best years of my life. Because I realize is being on a plane every other week takes a toll, and that I didn't even realize about it because it becomes habitual, right? You get so used to it. And the things like, oh, I can appreciate springtime. We went camping last summer, just like all over the place here in Western Washington, because we weren't on these other trips and stuff like that. So I've learned to appreciate home a lot more and realize that almost all the things that I love about travel, I can do within a 2 to 3 hour drive of my house. I don't have to get on a plane. And when you start looking at how much, what is it? It's from LA to New York round trip produces 5.2 metric tons of carbon dioxide. All right. That's more than driving for like 9 months. Okay, one round trip flight of that. Okay, so when you start realizing how much we're contributing to global warming and all that other stuff, you go, it's like, is there a better way? Can I travel, closer without having to do all that? Okay, sorry, going way too far into that one, but yes, I think you can do less travel and still be really getting the benefits of travel.
It's perfect. And you can be more meaningful with your travels moving forward too.
Exactly.
Right? There you
Exactly.
go. All right. Oh my goodness, you guys, we've had a lot of great questions. So just a couple more. So this is from Lisa. So in terms of speaking about the learning service, embracing being an outsider.
Yeah.
So being in a position to travel, how do you resolve feelings of privilege when visiting those that are not afforded the same privileges?
Okay. So part of it is, again, it's that mindset. Remember I said about people don't, they will embrace you more for your humanity than your competency. It's the same type of thing is, if you go with an attitude of privilege, and that is so hard to get past because it's ingrained, to a lot of, here I am, white male, right, in the United States, so I can speak with authority on this subject. I think when you, again, evidence that empathy to really seek to learn what the situation is there. Think about the things that you're not coming to, like, again, I hate using the word exploit, but I don't know a better word, from to glean things from them. Except to learn from people and to share in terms of experiences and all that. People can sense that. Honestly, people know if you're there for good reasons. Not what you are bringing is this: you're bringing that outsider perspective. You're bringing outsider resources. To me, this is one of the best reasons we travel. Is, quite honestly, it's one of the best wealth transfer opportunities that we have, to take our privilege and our wealth and share it with people who don't have it in a way that's mutually beneficial. And I think that's the key: seeking mutually beneficial situations. So it's always trying to lift up. To me, on one of these other presentations, someone asked me, "What's your kind of like mission statement for travel?" And I really didn't have one, but I said, I do see it this. It's almost like the Platonic concept of, I travel to experience what is good, what is true, and what is beautiful in the world. But that's only half of it. I do it to also bring beauty, truth, and goodness, hopefully the best I can, anywhere I can. And I think people resonate with that because they sense it's genuine. So,
Oh my goodness, you are so positive and uplifting. This is such a wonderful call. Oh my goodness. I'm sure everyone feels the same way as me. All right, last question that I see. If I missed anyone, feel free to drop it in the chat. But Lanny was curious, have you ever used Service, which is the local host organization, or Servas?
I have not. Actually, I don't. I haven't even heard of that. So that is, if that's in the trap, yeah, there it is. Okay, I will look that up because that sounds great. No, I have not. But that to me is like, that's what Airbnb used to be, from what I understand. From seeing the chat there, that's what it used to be. It's where you could actually stay in people's homes and get to know them and things like that, and have that intercultural experience there. So that would be great.
And that's a great reminder for everyone. If you just click on those three dots on the bottom right hand of your screen, you can save the chat that way if you are on your computer. My goodness, I think I got through all the questions. Everyone, that was phenomenal. Steve, what an amazing presentation. I'm blown away. I think I'm so excited to travel. I know you've inspired a lot of us to think differently. And I know I, for one, am very excited to read your book. I know you've given us a little bit of a glimpse of what's going to be in there, but everyone go pick it up in 2 days on Kindle and use that discount. It's a fantastic discount.
Yeah.
And
Good.
then before I share my screen again, Steve, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I just how much I appreciate the Nomadic Network. I appreciate you, Laura, and how you've handled this. And it's just, I don't know about you guys, if this is your first time here, but the more you participate in these and get to know people and participate, particularly in your local chapter ones, you really meet some wonderful people. And I think, as Erica has said in the past, or Leah, you even said the same thing, is that you don't get the opportunity to meet people that actually share the same passion that much. Mostly you start talking about your trip and people's eyes kind of glaze over and stuff. So yeah, it's just a great opportunity here to meet others like this. So I encourage you to participate as much as you can.
Well, thank you. And thank you so much for being here. And we're excited to see your book when it comes out. And yes, and I think you explained it perfectly. I mean, this is what the Nomadic Network is for. This is why it was created, for us all to connect with everyone. So that actually leads me into a perfect segue into what we have coming up. So for those of you who want more, as I mentioned, we have 3 different types of events. So we have these travel presentation style events, such as the one we just heard. So tomorrow we've got Gabby Beckford at PAX Light coming to talk to us about how to work remotely in 2021 with digital nomad visas. She's a phenomenal Gen Zer. She's just upbeat, great personality. So that's a good one to come to. They're all phenomenal. So they're all different, which is wonderful. You can see which one piques your interest. And then on the 1st, we have how to enjoy Italy. Thinking about, the Italian lifestyle and enjoying it at a slow pace. So that's going to be a wonderful one to transport us to Italy. And then we have Nomadic Matt himself talking to us on April 6th about visiting Memphis. So he's been doing a couple of these different cities in the US, which will be fun if you haven't been there before to explore that. And then we have Emma also on the 6th. She is the Singapore chapter leader, and she's going to be talking to us about her expat life and how to live abroad that way. And then, as I mentioned, we have these regional happy hours. So on the 1st, we have one in Washington, D.C., and this is going to be a virtual game night. So that sounds a lot of fun. So this is normally for those that are in that area, but if you're not in the area and you want to register, feel free to do that. And then check the calendar. I have the link up there. We have events all the way through June. And as I mentioned, these regional happy hours, we have them, pretty much monthly in the different areas, and they're more informal. So everyone's off mute. It's more just to connect and get to know everyone in your own community. And then every month we have a book club. So actually we're skipping this month, April, and we're going to move it to Wednesday, May 5th. And we have Rolf Potts coming to talk to us about his book, Marco Polo Didn't Go There. Phenomenal book if you haven't read it before. And these book clubs are such a great way because the author comes, speaks to us about the book. We can ask our questions directly to the author. So it's a really great informal way to meet the author. And that's it, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. It's been so wonderful to see all of your faces. This was such a great group. You all were so engaged with the questions, phenomenal questions. And we just love having you be a part of this travel community. And thank you, Steve, for being here and sharing all of your beautiful insight. I'm so excited to see what your next adventures are. And with that, everyone have a great night, great day. If it's the morning where you are, or wherever you are in the country. David in Mexico, David can drink a margarita for us. Everyone else enjoy and have a great day or night.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. And if you need to connect with Steve, I sent you his info in the chat box, so feel free to use that to connect. Wonderful. So great, Steve. I'm so excited to read your book.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
I'm
glad it resonated.
Too bad it's on Thursday, or because I could have gotten it before my trip.
Oh, that's right. Well, just bring your Kindle with you and just download it from there.
That's true. That's a very smart idea. I will do that.